In order to have everything organized well and working smoothly without any problems, we will need to do a few steps. We will go through these steps, but as I mentioned before, I will try to do it with mistakes just to show you how you can fix in a later stage, which is important because many times you will start with something, will end up with some problems. It's not elastic to go again and repeat everything from scratch. It's more affordable to go and fix things. But now we will learn how to do things in the right way. After you start your project, we will do that, of course, by going to start a new project. And now we will demonstrate everything using this scene. We will go directly to preferences. And preferences, as it shows, we have all the general and special setting for the scene. And some of them are so important because they can just flip things upside down. As you can see here in this scene, we will be working to export everything into 3D Max as example. And of course, the setup works for Maya, for Cinema 4D, and for Houdini the same way. But we will use 3D Max because we will be using also Krakatoa and V-Ray, which are available also in Maya. But just we needed to choose one software. So for that, we will go to General. Usually, the first thing we will do is to name a project folder. So as example here, because I'm recording everything and I'm putting the scene files inside the course files, in any of your hard drives, you just put some folders and you name them and you put the extension here or the path here. Means whenever you import something, open something, or bring something, RealFlow will go directly to this folder and start navigating from there. Most important thing is here the access setup. A lot of people I saw, they start working on their projects and they leave it as it is, Lightwave and Cinema 4D. But what if you are not working with Cinema 4D or Lightwave? What if you are working with 3D Max or Maya or XSI or even Houdini? You need to take that in consideration because the access totally different. And when you import things here, they will come up like normal. When you export them back to 3D, when you simulate and do some particles and meshing, they will be flipped. You have to rotate them in a certain way, and sometimes you have to scale them in a negative way just to have the mirror effect, or let's say flip them just to start to match the scene. It's not complicated, and we will be dealing with it, but this is to take in consideration. So because I'm exporting everything to 3D Max, I should choose this one. But what I will do is that I will leave it as it is, Lightwave and Cinema 4D, and I will deal with the problems when they arise with me, just to show you how we can fix this thing. The scaling, we don't want to mess with this thing now because when we import things, we can just go here and do things from here. Other than that, most of the other settings are normal settings. You will have to deal with just based on your needs. I will mention some of these, like the display here, display information. Whenever I choose any object here, I will have some information written in green, such as the amount of particles, XYZ, and some more information. So I don't need to display all the information for all the objects. Whenever I'm in RealFlow, it will fill the screen here totally. That's when I say all nodes. So what I need is whenever I select a node, I need to see some information here. That's why I just move it to selected nodes. Else, for the simulation, all these you can modify it after you start the simulation for Hybrido, Diverso, and Caronti, which is the read and soft body simulator for RealFlow. That's the most important things here in general, and we will see how to work with this. So I will say cancel. So basically my scene is set up in this, and Lightwave and Sema4D, which is absolutely not the software with I will deal with in this course. It's always important also when you start simulating things to take in consideration how to export things. So usually we go to export and we go to export central. You have to check this window and to make sure that you are exporting the right kind of data. So whenever I have any object here, it will be listed here and I can check yes or no to export it or to import it into from and to 3D application. Usually what we do is we choose to export with certain extensions because we want to deal with them based on certain renderer or 3D application. As example, I have the main particle system here for the water body, which is the domain. And if I go here, I will see the domain, hybrid domain. If I will open this, I have the domain itself, and in it, I can export it in one of these extensions. So the usual way is that RealFlow in general will create for the main hybrido water or liquid body a VDB file, which is the field cache file, and it's a must. It will come there, and it's the way you will get all the information to use for generating other particles later. So it includes the velocity, it includes acceleration and other information. So this is by default, and it will be created for sure. The other thing is the RBC, which is used basically to display things in here in viewport. If you don't have RBC, you can just see these particles in the viewport. But in the same time, you can export other parameters here. As you notice, verticity and normal are not checked in. This is by default. I'm not doing anything here. If we will go to Hybrido, go down, or let's say here, you will see that verticity and normal are not checked on. So if I will say yes here, I will notice that it's on here. It will be, we have to export it here, but here we ordered RealFlow to generate this channel. So I can export. If I will say yes here without generating this channel, it doesn't mean anything. So I will never get anything here. But anyway, we'll have RBC file. Now, all these other kind of files are so useful to import the data, which is the particles, into 3D application. Usually what we used to use is the bin file. Bin file is really a good way of exporting things. 3D application can import this in a sequence way. It means I can import a sequence of bin files. But recently we had the chance to deal with Alembic, which is added into RealFlow in the last few versions. And in it, we have all the parameters again. And of course, we have all the parameters in bin, but we have control here more to export whatever we need. The bad thing about Alembic is that when we export Alembic from here, we cannot import it as, we export it as a sequence. So every frame is one file. In 3D application, we cannot do that. We need to convert it using the tool I mentioned before here, which is Stitch Alembic. Then import it into 3D Max or Maya as one file. Then we'll be able to deal with it. For bin, this is not the case. We can import it without having it just one file. A sequence is easy to import there. Also, we have Krakatoa BRT, which we will be dealing with because unlike the water body, which we will export just the mesh, we don't need to export the particles from here. But for foam and for splash, we need to export BRT particles as we will import them in 3D and we'll use BRT loader in Krakatoa to be able to render them as fast as possible. And at the same time, we can include all the parameters to each particle of those, including displacement, texture, and everything. So before we do anything, before we start simulating things, we need to go and check whatever we need to export to make sure that we have all these reduced outside of real flow when needed. Two other things to mention before we jump into starting our projects. One of them is to make sure that the scaling of the scene is right. So usually we go here, and whenever we import any object, we will make sure that it fits here with real flow. If it's big, very big or small, we don't just go here to the node and try to scale things by scaling them here. It's much more convenient to go here and try to scale everything by applying universal scale into geometry scale or even cell scale, which as we will see, or the forces. We also need to check always for it's clipped here, but it says options. Before we start our simulation, we need to check the simulation option. We found it here also in the preferences, but this is the way we access it from here. And for every scene, we need to check this. Sometimes the scene needs more steps. Because we are using Hybrido, we will go to Hybrido. We'll choose the amount of steps here. Sometimes we manage everything using one step, which is, very amazing in real flow. Most of the times you just need one step by one steps, but sometimes you need to increase this. Also, you can go to Diverso. When you deal with Diverso, change the steps. The time scale means that if you want to speed up or make a slow motion scene, the currently the same thing for the dynamics, for the object dynamics, rigid and soft body. For frame per second, you can define the frame per second rate in each scene. So this is a must to visit. And also I have the option to choose to simulate everything here in the viewports. Means I can press simulate and I can see everything happening here in the viewport. But also I have the other choice, which is, as mentioned here, to simulate everything in the background using the command line. So what I do, again, it's clipped here, but it says command line. If I will check it on or off, I will have the option to have everything simulated in the scene. If I press simulation now, I will see everything during the simulation, but that will make it difficult for me to work on something else or to navigate because everything is loaded here and it's just everything heavy and it's not fast. If I will go to command line and activate it, means everything going to be simulated in the background, and we will have just one window to watch everything, and we can update, slide, and work on anything or change anything during the simulation. So this is for the scene. Now we will go through some information about Hybrido, how to set up Hybrido. We have really a very specific way of getting things for Hybrido to work well. Then we will start with our first project, which is the beach project. Let's talk about the whale project, which if we want to do, we need to learn more about how to do waves. And that's why we will start with the beach project. But in general, let's talk about it a little. So as you can see, I have very specific shape for the water. Why? Because I contain it in this shape. As you will see, we'll import all the objects from 3D, but in general, if I will go here and see some of these objects. So I have this object, and basically here is a table. It's supposed to be a table, and it's an actual project for a client where everything should happen inside the table. People will come around the table and they will see what's happening here. The whale will jump. it will eat something, as we'll see, and it will jump again into the water. As you can see here, it will just take a time to load because we have almost 15 million particles here. It will jump from here and into the sky. It's, of course, this is very art directed scenario. It doesn't have to be a very realistic jump, because if I will have a whale jumping out of the water, it will not reach this height. But because we have a very specific scenario and the director wanted to have everything set up in a specific way, that's why we need to customize and to have control over everything here as we have in real flow. It will jump here, then it will jump into the water, smash the water, and create a big splash. So basically this is the scenario. And if you notice here, I have a lot of frames after the impact because the scenario included other things. If you notice, I have two pieces here. I have this piece and this piece, while I just need one piece to contain all the water. Actually, this will be animated later. And after 300, if I will jump here to 318, this will open and it will allow the water to come out of this area. And just to give you more idea about all the setup we have here, if I will go up, I will have displacement container or displaced container. The container has the shape, as you can see here, a just closed object which has specific. I'm pressing 2 on the keyboard just to see from side view. I will hide other objects just to concentrate on this shape. If you see, it has this angle. I will go to 4 again to see the perspective. So the water should stand on this ground, and eventually when I open the door, which is here, this door, I will allow the water to come and slide. And if I will look at it from this perspective, all the water will go in this direction, leaving some kind of waves and tails like this. And I don't care about this because in the scenario, we will not have the door opening. We will just have everything sliding under the table. As example, what people will see is this. They will see everything inside here. So they don't care about this. Actually, it should collide to show that we have a surface here. So if we will continue, we'll have the water sliding all the way until it's out. For our course, we will not go all the way. All we need to do is to create the scenario here with the jumping whale and to have everything interacting well with the whale. But this is to give you an idea about what we are doing here, and this is one of the most important concepts in dealing with liquid softwares, the ability to rig things. So I can animate any object. I can just create a land here. I can load some texture to make it collide or interact with the liquid in a specific way, like friction. I can customize whatever I need. But this is how this scene is set up. I will go here and I will hide some objects. I don't need to see this displaced object. Also, I don't need to see the frames. Now, to create this, we need to create the waves. The water itself, it should be quiet and stable when we start the simulation. But in our scenario, it should be stormy and actually have a lot of waves. So we have really specific order to establish things when we're dealing with a real flow hybrido. I will try to write things here in a simple way, and we will have this as Word file later in the scenes. So I will say the steps, the typical steps. are like this. So first we create the whale animation in 3D application. And basically, before you import anything, we just need to create the model, rig it, try to animate it in a specific way, then prepare it for exporting. Means that it's preferred to be closed without any holes in it. And we just export it with all the objects like the doors and like the frame and like the displaced object all together here. In this scenario, I also exported the tongue and the eyes. I don't need to export them because the whale is closing his mouth when he's inside the water. But anyway, I imported everything. So the first step, I would say, creating the whale animation in 3D application, 3D Max or Maya or whatever you want. The second step is to import the animation into RealFlow. Just importing the animation, we need to define the way we import things. If I have a destruction or some fractured object, I prefer to import it as multi-body because usually it doesn't have any animation. We'll create the animation here. So we will import it as multi-bodies, which allow us to bring thousands of objects here to start our simulation. But if I have animation, I need to import it using import option as SD file or Alembic file. So here, let's say importing the animation objects or the animated objects into RealFlow as SD or Alembic files. After that, we need to consider and understand the export and import central. Now, let's say that the third step would be creating the main water body. By going to Hybrido, we can create open or closed domain. The difference between the two is not much, but it's easier to create a closed domain, and everything will be under one node to scale it and to do whatever we want like this. So it includes the water body, but we also create emitters, so we can just emit the particles in a very specific area. So creating the water body, which we also say hybrido domain. After that, we need to make sure that we prepare for the displacement or some noise pattern on the water, which we saw in the beginning of this course, small kind of displacements. So we need to take care of the displacement preparation to be able to simulate and have them all ready for a later stage. Now, also, we will create some waves using ocean forces. So we will have everything we see here. After that, we can go to the step number 4, which is creating all the particle systems here, which is the white particle systems. We will see more about how to create each one of them, but we have a lot of particle systems here, and I can include here creating the white particles. And I can put them under A, B, C, D. So I would say first we can start with splash, because we can't just by getting the splash ready, we can create some foam out of the splash. So it's really wise to start with splash. We have options to generate the splash alone or the splash with the foam together, but I tend always to create everything alone because I have control and I export them separately, so we have full control over everything. So the splash and the foam, and we also we will see that creating one splash system is not enough. So what we can do is to create multi splash system, and then creating the foam. After that, we can create other secondary particles such as bubbles, such as waterline if needed. In this case, we don't need it really, but I will mention it here. Waterline is the kind of particles which you need to create when you have a ship, because it's just, around the edges where the object touches the water, or submarine or something like that. But here we don't need it because we have just a jumping creature. Also, we need sometimes to create the wet particles. We can create mist, and the mist particles, as we will see here, the mist particles are important. Basically, we will be creating this in RealFlow as VDB file, which is a volumetric file. Means we cannot really have them as particles here. We can, if you will go here to export central and try to see what the mist looks like. So I can do just simple thing. I can create a mist, and let's go to export. So if I will search for the mist, here's the mist. You can see that I can export them as one of two kind of files, which is VDB, which is volumetric file, or F3D. Both of these are able to be used in FumeFX or Phonics FD to apply some shaders and have some, let's say, cloudy shape of water, which is how the water will act after staying a long time in the air, because it will be like small drops. So mist, we will be generating this during our course, but let's just make one note about the bubbles. So the bubbles in many other softwares are created in a different way. So here in RealFlow, we separate the bubbles from the foam. It's clearly the foam is above the water or touching the water, and the bubble is under the water or touching the water. But we have two different systems. The foam cannot live under the water, except if we will say which, under the surface or above the surface we need them to live. And the bubbles usually are under the waters. But as example, in Phonics FD, the bubbles and the foam is one system. So the bubble can continue coming from out, and we can see it like floating outside the water. In RealFlow, the same can happen, but the systems are separated. So we can shade them differently. We can do whatever we need differently. And I liked how things are happening here. Even we have really a huge amount of control in Phonics FD as example, or in Houdini. The fifth step is to mesh the body, the water body. So meshing the water body. And we will learn about how we can establish that using different methods. After that, we can export everything to 3D application, exporting everything. So basically, we will export the mesh. We don't need to export these particles except if we have use for them. Sometimes, yes, we do that, but we'll export the mesh. We'll export all the kind of particles. So in this case, we'll export the splash, the other splash one, the foam, the mist, whatever we created during the course. And after that, in 3D application, let's say 7, What we will do is that we will start setting up the scene. So let's say rendering setup. For that, I will go ABC also, and I will say that the first thing we will use V-Ray to render the water body or the mesh, and you can also use Arnold, Mental Ray, or Mantra, whatever you need to use, Octane. I would say V-Ray is one of the best because we will be exporting things from here as Alembic, but we will import things, as you will see, as proxy files. Then we will use Krakatoa to render the particles, and after that to render the particles. After that we will use the Fume FX or Phonics FD to render the mist. That's it. This is all we need to do in our course. Usually these are the steps we follow to create liquids or a big surface of water in real flow using Hybrido. So it's important to follow this order, as we will see.